Hello, all you amazing and creative people. My name is Steven, and welcome back to Daz 3D. We are talking about creating awesome cinematics in Unity using Daz 3D assets. If you want to be able to create cinematics like the one that is playing right now, which is being rendered in real time in Unity, this is the kind of stuff that you could use for creating video games or even exporting footage like we're going to be doing in this tutorial, then stick around. If you missed episode 1, feel free to go back and check that out. We do a lot of the upfront legwork, getting your assets ready in Daz, bringing them into Unity, and getting our Unity project a little organized and ready to start creating. In this episode, we're going to start putting things together, and we are going to start building our timeline and creating our cinematic. Let's go ahead and get started in Daz Studio. Just a quick reminder, for this project I chose to use the Ico 8 character and this treasure hunter outfit. I'm also just going to be using some hair that I had in my library. Feel free to use any character that you want. It's not going to make a difference in the end result. Since most of you are already experts at Daz 3D and probably know more about it than I do, I'm not going to spend too much time on the character creation phase. If you need help with this part, especially if you're new or as a Unity user trying Daz for the first time, please check out our website. We have a lot of helpful videos that are going to explain how to do this. In short, I'm just taking the items from my smart content folder, double clicking and loading them into the scene. Some things to keep in mind, like if you want to add hair, make sure that you have your character selected when you double click and load the hair, so Daz knows to apply it to that character. Same is true for any prop or clothing, pretty much any addition that you're adding to a character in Daz Studio. Once you're satisfied with how your character looks, we can go ahead and export it to Unity. So with it selected, just like we did before, we're going to go to Send to Daz to Unity, make sure that it's a skeletal mesh. Other than that, default settings should be just fine, so we'll click Accept. Alright, once you've done that, we can hop back into Unity, and now you'll see the imported character. There's a few things that you do need to do. Come to your Assets folder. So you can see the character here, but we need to do some things to prepare the model. So we're going to go to the Daz 3D, then find the folder that contains your model. Go here, you'll see an image of the actual model. There's some different options here. Make sure you click on Rig, and for the animation type, it's probably going to say generic, and you need to set it as humanoid, which I have already done, and then you would need to press Apply. So that is most likely something you're going to have to do when you first import it. That's very important. I've also created in the hierarchy a place to store my character prefab. So you can see I can move it around there. It has a lot of children objects underneath the root. So you may have to play with the position of some of the children to make sure that it lines up with the world position of the root. So you just want to zero that out so that they match up. That way when you move the root, it moves the children and they're all in the same place, and it's not as confusing while you're trying to work with your character. It's just kind of a little quirk that happens sometimes when you're importing complex characters or objects like this into Unity. Now that we've got our character in, let me show you how I set up my scene. So like we talked about before, we've added the texture to the desert, but I want to show you how I started to create really the setting that I wanted to make my cinematic in. So first thing we're going to do is just start dragging prefabs into the scene. It's really that easy. And you can start to arrange them in a way that cinematically makes sense. So in this case, I am thinking about the position of the sun. I am thinking about possible shots that I might want to do in my cinematic, and then I am trying to create an interesting scene using the tools that I have. And the nice thing about these modular assets is we can build it however we want and to suit our needs. Creating cinematics like we are pose really fun and interesting creative constraints. Unlike, say, a video game where typically the camera follows the player and the player has the ability to pretty much look in any direction, when you're making cinematics or film, you get to choose the angles and you get to decide what the viewer sees, and they don't have to see anything else. So instead of creating a fully immersive level like you would in a video game, with a cinematic you can be a little more choosy. You don't have to waste time creating details that aren't necessarily going to be in a shot, but you also have to put a lot more thought into what each camera angle is going to look like and how you can make the best out of your compositions. So that's kind of what I'm doing here, is I'm already thinking about potential shots. At this point, I'm thinking about maybe looking through this arch towards the sun, seeing the character, and a lot of that could change, but for now, I'm just experimenting and trying to get a feel for each angle and what it could mean for my composition. I think that's one of my favorite things about making cinematics this way is the creativity that I'm able to explore and the ability to create really cool shots. While a lot of people love video games and being able to explore, I know I do too, sadly, I can only imagine how many beautiful pieces of art I have passed by in video games simply because I didn't know that it was there, or I didn't stop to point my camera in that direction and experience the beauty that the artist had created. I think that's a downside of being able to control the camera. We are going to miss art, and we aren't always going to see the beautiful sunset or the view over the cliff because we're just running through a level playing a game. Whereas in a cinematic like this, we can still create an immersive world, but we have the opportunity to make sure that the viewer sees the beauty that we want them to see. It's pretty exciting. If you look at my hierarchy, you can see at first I'm not too preoccupied with how it looks. The prefabs are all over the place in the hierarchy. Those are the blue items, the game objects that I'm placing. Eventually, I will organize them all under the architecture parent game object. For now, just place and don't worry about stuff like that. I am moving around my camera, I'm exploring different angles. At this point, I'm just trying to decide what I want this to look like. Notice you could create larger game objects. While this isn't always recommended, since you could lose resolution, in this case I felt like it was okay and it didn't have too bad of an effect, so I did make the objects a little bigger just to give a appearance of grand scale. Since I didn't plan on having the camera really close to any of these objects necessarily, I felt okay making them a little bit larger. Whereas in a game, that might not be such a good idea, because if the camera gets really close to them, it's going to become more apparent that the textures are a little stretched. So use that carefully, but just know it is available to you if you need to do that. Alright, now that I'm pretty confident in the overall composition, I'm just playing around with the position of the sun, and what I'm demonstrating here is how you can actually change the rotation settings of the sun to move it up and down, simulating a real-world movement of the Earth and the sun. So you can see here in some positions it's going to look more like dusk or dawn, sunset, midday. We can play around with those settings to try to find a general look that we like for the scene. Another way that you can manipulate that is with the temperature, which can create some interesting coloration there as well. So feel free to experiment with that as you set up your own scene and try to decide what time of day and the kind of lighting that you want in your cinematic. All right, there you have it. We now have a character ready to go and a set created for our cinematic. If you're enjoying this, please like, subscribe if you haven't, and stick around for the next video where we will talk about creating the actual cinematic itself using Unity Timeline. Can't wait to see you there.